Welcome to the France 24 debate. I'm Mark Owen. Thank you very much for joining us. Tonight, chemical weapons in Ukraine. There are calls from the US and Britain for an investigation after Ukrainian soldiers of the Azov regiment were reportedly injured by a poisonous substance during another Russian assault on the port city of Mariupol. There's no evidence yet, though, gathered to prove this. Though the UK Foreign Secretary says it will be a callous escalation of the war, the Pentagon says it's deeply concerning. The Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has already expressed his fears that Russia could deploy chemical weapons in his country.
Today we heard a statement from the occupiers confirming they are preparing for a new stage in their terror against us and our defenders. One of the spokespeople of the invaders said they are considering using chemical weapons against the defenders of Mariupol. We take it very seriously. I want to remind world leaders that a possible use of chemical weapons had already been discussed by the Russian military.
Volodymyr Zelensky, President of Ukraine. Well, the history of the use of chemical weapons dates back, of course, to the First World War, captured in famous lines by the likes of the soldier poet Wilfred Owen. There have been notable incidents that have shocked the world since, and we're not talking about incidents in the distant past either. Our guests to discuss the issues in Kyiv were joined by Inna Sovsun, Member of Parliament in Kyiv of the Callous Party of Ukraine. Inna, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. Thanks.
In Berlin, William Alberg, who's the Director of Strategy, Technology and Arms Control at the ISS. That's the International Institute for Strategic Studies. Thank you, sir, for being with us.
Thank you.
And here in studio, Reid Brody, member of the International Commission of Jurists, former Assistant Attorney General of New York State, and former Human Rights Watch spokesperson. Reid, thank you very much for being with us.
Right, welcome.
I'd like to start with you in Kyiv, Inna Sovsun, from your perspective, because I think basically it's really relevant. Oh, excuse me. We have another guest. Another guest, not a late edition, Melinda Herring, who's joining us in Washington. Melinda is from the Atlantic Council, specialist on Eurasian affairs, and always a welcome visitor to our shores. Thank you very much indeed once again for joining us here, Melinda. And I apologize for leaving you out. You'd somehow fallen off my script, which is purely my oversight, and I apologise for that. Let's begin with Inna Sovsun then, in Kyiv, Member of Parliament for the Callous Party of Ukraine. Inna, I was drawn to a tweet that you put online recently regarding the possible use of chemical weapons. Can you discuss with us your fears about what's happening and what you think is about to happen?
Well, first of all, we do know that the Russians have been, playing with this issue of chemical weapon, and we do know that they were using some types of chemical weapons in eastern Ukraine. Particularly the phosphorus bombs have definitely been used in Donbass, and then also in the northeast in Sumy region from the very first weeks of the war that started on February 24th. But then, of course, the biggest fear is the massive use of a chemical weapon, and that again has been a threat throughout the whole period of this invasion. But then about 48 hours ago, we heard from one of the leaders of the so-called People's Republic, from Donetsk People Republic, going live on television, on local television, saying that apparently right now they realize that they cannot defeat Ukrainian regiments, Ukrainian soldiers in Mariupol simply by direct engagement with them. So they are willing and they are ready to start chemical attacks. That was the almost direct quote from their side. You also have to realize that those people from so-called People's Republics are also part of the war, and they're fighting on the Russian side. So we took that very seriously. And then 24 hours after that, we heard the news from Mariupol, from Azov regiment, saying that there has been some attack from the air. Some substance has been spread over the territory of the big plant where they have been located, and that many soldiers over there started feeling badly, having problems breathing, and 3 of them had serious issues with breathing. None of the soldiers have been killed by that attack. we do not know, and I cannot, deny or confirm anything, because we cannot, for obvious reasons, we cannot get access to the substance that was spread over that plant, because we don't have access to that territory. But what we can state is that some substance was spread. People started having problems breathing. We have heard from some members of Azov regiment that apparently they have spread it a little bit further from where they have been located. This could have been the reason why they were not killed by the attack. Apparently, they misjudged where exactly they are located, or it could have been not a strong substance. We cannot say for sure, and I don't want to spread information that I cannot confirm for sure. But those are the facts, that they were talking about using chemical weapons, and then some substance was spread that did lead to many problems with breathing among Ukrainian soldiers. Those are facts that we can definitely confirm.
And Inna, the coming back to the post on social media that you made, talking about Eduard Bazaran, speaking from the Donetsk People's Republic, alleged, so-called, talking about the possibility of using, I believe the expression was chemical soldiers, something of that ilk, to go and smoke out the soldiers who are in the industrial units in Mariupol. Surely what he's actually saying is killing them, isn't he?
Yeah, precisely. And that literally happened like almost 24 hours before that attack started. That is why you can imagine when we heard about the attack, we directly linked the two facts. They go on air, they say that they're prepared to, and they did use this strange form of chemical soldiers, chemical troops, whatever that means. And then this happens. So they were kind of warning us and the world, I believe, that they're prepared to use whatever it takes. Because, again, you have to realize the majority of the Ukrainian soldiers are now located in the industrial units of the big plant. And it's very, very difficult, almost impossible, to basically, smoke them out of there, unless some sort of other weapon is used, which is chemical weapon, which they were promising to use. The major question is how the world will react to that right now. And that is the issue, because we did hear from the Western leaders saying that chemical weapon is somewhere where they will step in and will react harshly to. The question right now is if that is confirmed to have been chemical weapon of a sort, how the West will react, and whether they will react the way they actually promised to react to Putin and to Russia. That is the biggest question for us right now.
Indeed. And I don't think we can answer that question around this table, but certainly we can discuss the issues and get inside what might happen, what might not happen. Inna Sovson, thank you very much indeed. We'll come back to you very shortly. So Inna Sovson then confirming the sense of what was going to happen, and then putting together the actual reports of what came out of Mariupol, and what she was tweeting about, talking about on social media, was actually something that happened and went on air in Russian state TV. Melinda Herring of the Atlantic Council, can I bring you in on that one? In your perspective, what is this adding up to, and what is it going to mean for NATO going forward, do you think?
Hi, Mark. It's great to be back with you. I'm not sure what it means for NATO. I can probably give you a better perspective on what it means for Washington. So Biden has said that if chemical weapons are used, that there would be severe consequences. He did not specify what those consequences could be. Some people think this is a good thing, that there's some ambiguity, and he left it open. I would have preferred if he had put down a red line and said what those consequences are. I think it's better to be direct with Vladimir Putin. I think the likely outcome, though, in the West and with NATO and Washington is that there's going to be less hesitancy to send, quote-unquote, escalatory weapons. So all the big weapon systems that Ukraine has been asking for, begging for, the S-300s, the BTRs, the big rocket systems, I think that the West is finally going to send them if Putin's forces did indeed use chemical weapons, especially after Bucha.
Indeed, it's one of these things that obviously it needs to be proven, and the only way to do that is to get on the scene and actually make those kind of investigations, and that is easier said than done in Mariupol right now. Melinda, for the moment, thank you very much indeed. Let's bring in William Alberg, who's in Berlin, Director of Strategy, Technology and Arms Control at the IISS, the International Institute for Strategic Studies. William, from what you've heard, from what we've gleaned, and from what Inna's been telling us, what is your kind of sense of what is happening?
I think Russia's rhetoric gets far ahead of any kind of rational strategy. And the idea that they're going to threaten to use chemical weapons is just, it's unfortunately something that we've seen them actually endorse the use of in Syria. They protected the Syrian government after the Syrian regime used chemical weapons to clear cities. So it's entirely possible that this is something that they're thinking about. We've also seen them target sort of industrial waste or chemical storage containers at other locations. So attribution is going to be key. If this is actually a use of chemical weapons, particularly a military-grade nerve agent, then there has to be a response from the West. But as you pointed out, Mark, it's really hard to tell at this point anything, and getting in there for real attribution is going to be very difficult.
There's been that kind of Russian tactic of, claimed tactic. They've said they've fired on something. They didn't fire a particular thing, but it was released because of what they hit. Is that what they might claim this time, do you think?
They might claim that, but again, we're not going to be able to tell. It's clear that they're just desperate to try to eliminate the remaining Ukrainian fighters who are fighting to the last person. And if they get really desperate, who knows what they'll do.
For the moment, William, thank you very much indeed. Reid Brodie's here in the studio, former Human Rights Watch spokesperson. From your perspective, Reid, I mean, I know we can't, talk about chemicals and issues like that, but what we can talk about is human rights and the possibilities of what this might add up to in terms of future investigations, because Vladimir Putin's been quoted as saying that this military operation, as he likes to call it, in Ukraine is noble. I think the only person who probably believes that is him. What do you think this might add up to, what we've seen today?
Well, this would be one more escalation. I think, unfortunately, the Russian forces have broken just about every rule, beginning, of course, with the invasion itself. And I think it's always important to remember that the worst crime under international law is the crime of aggression. That was at Nuremberg considered to be the supreme international crime that carries the accumulation of all the other crimes. And most of the German leaders at Nuremberg were convicted for crime against peace. Then we have seen day after day, unfortunately, violations of the laws of war, the Geneva Conventions. We have seen civilians be attacked. We have seen civilian hospitals, theaters, schools, buildings. We've seen, even if chemical weapons are not, we don't know about that yet, we have seen indiscriminate weapons be used in violation of the laws of war. Cluster bombs that spread bomblets over a football field, the use of indiscriminate weapons. There's clearly war crimes, crimes against humanity that have already been committed. And obviously, if chemical weapons were used, that would be one more escalation.
Reid Brodie, thank you very much indeed. The British Armed Forces Minister has confirmed that the NATO stance in many ways over the possible use of chemical weapons. James Heapy earlier underlining, though there is no definitive proof yet. Let's hear what he has to say.
There were some reports circulating on Ukrainian social media yesterday evening that chemical weapons had been used in Mariupol. Overnight, that's not something that defence intelligence here in London have been able to confirm, nor any of their intelligence counterparts with our allies around the world. And indeed, President Zelensky's address last night also referred to reports, so there's been no verification within the Ukrainian system either.
That's James Heapy, the UK's Armed Forces Minister. Let's bring in Ina Sovson for more on that one. Ina Sovson, I don't know whether you heard what James Heapy had to say, but this kind of sense that, there's with no proof yet, or we don't quite know, but you've known for a long time about things that you've been telling us about in this program. You've known these things are happening.
Yes, truly. And again, we all have to realize that when we on our side are saying that we cannot confirm it, we also cannot deny this, right? We simply cannot get access to the territory of Mariupol to conduct independent investigation. We can only refer to what is known to us, and that is what we know from the direct talks with the people who are there, who have been there during the attack. So again, I want to be very responsible with what I'm saying. That is why I cannot just claim that this was definitely a chemical weapon. weapon attack, but that was a very serious crime anyways. Some sort of substance was used, and we also understand that they can go further. Just today, today in the morning, a video was released by many Russian social media publics, and it's spread all over Russia right now in media, which they claim to be the video of Ukrainian commander reading the decree of the Ukrainian president. And the decree, according to that video, says that Ukrainian President Zelensky asks the troops to go into Russian territory and attack Russian territories. When you hear the video itself and the voice of the person saying that, they did make several mistakes, which actually point out that they were not from the Ukrainian context. They used the wrong word for the official name of the Ukrainian army. They used the wrong word for the description of the decree of the president. So they used just a slightly different word, but that makes sense to us here. So we do know that that is a made-up video that they're using, but this is actually very scary because they can arrange for a false flag attack on the Russian territory, terrorist attack, blowing stuff up, anything they can arrange on their territory, and then they can use it as a justification for using chemical weapons or, God bless us, nuclear weapon. That is what I'm very much concerned about. Like the whole day, this video has been circulating around Russian publics and Russian social media, saying that the attacks by Ukrainians are being prepared on the South Russian territories. I am very much concerned that this is the preparation for something more to come, and I hope the world will react. And I actually would agree with Melinda over here that at this point, I believe it's time for the West to say how exactly they will react in case they go for a full-spread chemical attack, or again, we are not talking about that, but nuclear option. I do believe that should be pointed out specifically by the West right now until it is too late.
Ina, I've heard you call for a no-fly zone. I've heard you call for more action. Let's take a listen to NATO's Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg speaking recently regarding the situation, regarding the aid that be given to Ukraine. He's also talking about cybersecurity as another issue. And I think given what you've just said, Ina, about the manipulation of images and what's been going on, it's really important. Let's take a listen to Jens Stoltenberg's words.
Allies are also supporting and stepping up humanitarian aid and financial support. We discussed what more we will do, including cyber security assistance and providing equipment to help Ukraine protect against chemical and biological threats.
I'm supposed to be on the fence here, but when I hear those kind of words, I feel a little bit frustrated. And Melinda, can I bring you into comment on this one? Because Ina was leading naturally to you. Do you share her feelings that it really is now time for NATO to get off the fence?
Absolutely. Mark, I think this is one of the underreported parts of the big Ukraine story. So everyone is patting themselves on the back and talking about what a fabulous job the West did, what a fabulous job NATO has done, and how the West has come together. But I'm sorry, when you look at images from Ukraine, the West hasn't done that great of a job. We have not deterred Vladimir Putin. He is bound and determined to bring down Mariupol, probably by a big deadline in May. He needs to show the Russian people some real gains. So far, he's been at this for 7 weeks. He's taken one big city, the city of Kherson. That's it. He needs gains in the Donbass. So we expect the Russians to start another real attack in the Donbass this week, and it's really a tipping point for Ukraine. And look, the Ukrainians have to hold their ground and they have to withstand. But the way that this next battle is going to be fought is not going to be advantageous to the Ukrainians. I hate to say that, but the first phase of the war was advantageous to Ukraine because Ukrainians have smaller units. They have a civilian structure. It's for a lot of different reasons. And Russia has been fighting with old school tactics. The old school tactics are going to be, and they have much, much more equipment as well. So the next round is not going to be as easy for Ukraine. And that's why it's essential right now for the West to get them those heavy weapon systems as soon as possible.
Melinda, thank you very much indeed. Let's go back to Berlin. William Alberg is waiting for us there from the International Institute for Strategic Studies. This next stage of the development, we saw obviously a few days ago the horrific strike on the railway station in Kramatorsk, the death, destruction that was caused there. There is a warning to people in the east, civilians, families, to leave their homes, to get out because the Russians are going to attack. What are the next few days likely to be like, do you think?
So the Russian forces are forming up for, just as Melinda was saying, for a mass attack in the Donbass, which is what we really thought they were going to do in the first place. They're going to use combined arms maneuver. They're going to use massed fires. And this is where Ukraine needs, exactly as Melinda and Anna both said, heavy equipment. They're going to need artillery. They're going to need multiple launcher rocket systems. They're going to need the kinds of weapons that can disrupt Russian formations that are trying to mass to attack the Ukrainian side. And they're going to need some longer range anti-air, S-300s. They're going to need a lot of ammunition. 152 millimeter artillery, 155 millimeter artillery, mounted artillery, everything. We've heard that the U.S. Suicide drones, the Switchblades, have gone in, but they're going to need more. They're going to need volume. They're going to need to be able, as I said, to disrupt those Russian attacks so that they can find the different points that they can win and push the Russian troops back.
William, do you recall Sergei Lavrov talking about arms shipments of the like from the West into Ukraine being a legitimate target? Do you recall Lavrov saying that?
I do. And look, anything that's in the field of battle, Russia is going to feel is a target. If they hit it on NATO territory, they're going to be in for a response. But once things pass into Ukrainian territory, they're going to try their best to destroy it and to disrupt our ability to resupply, which means we're going to need to use every means we can to resupply them as much as possible. And I think the Russians ultimately are going to lose this battle.
Do you think the Russians are going to basically start hitting strategic points in the west of Ukraine? I mean, clearly there was the incident regarding the TV mast that was struck not too far from Lviv, but not too close either. Do you think Russia's going to actually step up that kind of aggression?
Absolutely. I think in the early stage of the war, they really hoped that they were going to take over all of Ukraine very, very quickly, that the Ukrainian government would collapse and that the military would not fight and resist in the strong way that it has. So it, in the early stages, left a lot of the infrastructure alone. Now I think it's going to go much more concertedly after Ukrainian infrastructure across the country to disrupt fuel supplies, ammo supplies, resupply lanes, things like that. And that's why Ukraine needs more air defense, more dedicated air defenses that can also shoot down some of these cruise missiles.
Can I ask you, no-fly zone, yes or no?
I think at this stage, no. I think if we see more atrocities, the appetite for a no-fly zone will grow and grow. And particularly if we see chemical or nuclear use, I think everything has to be on the table.
Indeed. Stoltenberg, of course, has said that it's not going to happen. That was his point then. But, of course, as you say, William, it might change. Reid Brody, can I bring you in here at this point? We heard earlier from Stoltenberg, Jens Stoltenberg, to give his full title, Secretary General of NATO, talking about stepping up humanitarian and financial support, discussing cybersecurity assistance, providing equipment to help Ukraine protect against chemical and biological threats. I wonder, someone with your background, when you listen to his words, do you feel reassured in any way?
Well, I'm a little out of place here as a human rights lawyer,
Sure.
and I really respect the discussion that's going on right now, and obviously the future of the Ukraine and Ukrainian people will be decided by these kinds of questions. Sure. I mean, I can talk about the legal response.
Please do.
And I have to say, if there's one small consolation in all of this, it's that we have never seen the institutions of international justice react so quickly. There are investigations now going on in the Ukraine, and the Ukrainian prosecutor has opened 5,600 cases. The High Commissioner for Human Rights talked about 1,892 people killed. We have 11 different countries participating in criminal investigations, either to support Ukrainian investigations or to support the International Criminal Court, which has sprung into action. We see countries around the world, including countries that have their own problems with the International Criminal Court, moving to support the ICC. We have the International Court of Justice in The Hague, which has already ordered Russia to cease its military activities in Ukraine. I know that much of this is cold comfort to people who are being bombed and who are being killed, but I do think we are putting Russian forces on notice. And I think the faster that goes, it's because it's not just Vladimir Putin. We see war crimes being committed at lower and mid levels. Of course, we have to identify them, we have to verify them. Pictures alone will not do the trick. But I do think that there is going to be, hopefully sooner rather than later, some sort of accountability here for the crimes that are being committed.
Does that go straight to the head? Is it Putin who sets the tone for everything that has happened? Is that the kind of how the legal process would look upon it?
Well, of course, in terms of the crime of aggression, yes. I mean, clearly that's a leadership crime, and that leads straight to the top. In terms of war crimes, one can be, if presumably Vladimir Putin is watching the same images that we watch, or if he's not, he's chosen not to. And even if he didn't give orders, there is a principle called command responsibility, in which your subordinates are committing crimes and you watch them committing, or you're aware that those crimes are being committed and you don't take action to stop them. So obviously, these are things that will have to be determined by an investigation in a court of law. But these don't seem to be individual soldiers who made mistakes. There seems to be, if we look at Mariupol, we look at the bombing of the theater, we look at what happened in Bucha. There seems to be a callousness, and at the very least a callousness. We can also look, unfortunately, and we heard before about Syria, we can look at what many of the same Russian forces did in Syria, in Idlib and Aleppo, and what they did in Grozny. The fact that nobody was prosecuted for those, the fact that Syrians were not prosecuted for the use of chemical weapons, all of that makes these things more likely. And hopefully, hopefully the mobilization of international justice will lead to some results, even if not now, for the future.
Reid, thank you very much indeed. Hans Kluge of the World Health Organization, he said of the European operations, has spoken about the whole issue of chemical weapons. He says the WHO is preparing for possible chemical assaults in Ukraine. Let's listen to his words.
Of the current situation, there are no assurances that the war will not get worse. WHO is considering all scenarios and making contingencies for different situations that could afflict the people of Ukraine, from the continued treatment of mass casualties to chemical assaults.
Inna, can I bring you in again? Inna, of course, joining us from Kiev, where she is an MP. Thank you for being with us. We always appreciate your thoughts. Inna Sovson, Member of Parliament for the Callous Party. How shocked have you been by what you've seen emerge around Kyiv, of course, in the towns that are occupied by the Russians? I mean, clearly, we've been incredibly shocked by it. How shocked were you when you found out what had been going on?
Well, of course, that has been a very painful experience. I've been trying to think how I feel about that when the first images emerged. And it's very difficult to process. And I was actually surprised about my own reaction, because I couldn't even cry. I think what I felt, and that's a very personal comment, but I felt this emptiness inside. It just, you are looking at this and you can't believe that these are the streets that I have been to. This is the road that I take to drive to my parents' place. This is the park that I had a walk with, with my boyfriend. This is the place I went to on the weekend with my son. And this is where this has all been happening. And then we were learning more and more about that. We actually, every day, we continue to uncover more information about what has happened. And every time, it's just like everyone is just in shock, I think. It's very difficult to process this. I think the toughest piece of news that I have read was the information about the rape cases over there. One of the cases which shocked me as a mother most of all is probably the case of 3 Russian soldiers raping an 11-year-old boy with his mother, forced to watch. They tied his mother to a chair and made her watch while they were raping her own son, 11-year-old boy again. This is something that you just can't process. It's impossible to process all of this. So I think what I'm feeling right now is just this emptiness, and I don't know how to deal with that sort of trauma. I can't even imagine how people who have been there are dealing with that. And of course, the government right now is trying to provide support to those people, but it's just overwhelming. It's thousands of people who need this sort of help. Thousands of people who are still waiting to understand whether their loved ones are alive or dead. Today in the morning, we read that the police was patrolling the area that was around Kyiv that was under Russian occupation, and they found yet another car that was bombarded by Russians with 2 women and 3 children in the car, dead for a couple of weeks now. They were trying to escape from the horrors, and they have been killed. Like every single day, we are learning yet about more and more death. And this is just extremely difficult to process. We're just trying, like, what I'm trying to do, again, very personal comment, is just to focus on, okay, we have to bring justice to those people. And very much I'm grateful to the comments made earlier about the justice process. We understand it will take time, but I think it's a matter of, it's a national matter for us right now. We have to bring those responsible for justice. And then there is another, again, personal comment, which doesn't have to do with the international criminal law or anything, but I want people in Russia to watch very detailed videos about what their soldiers did here on Ukrainian territory, what they did to Ukrainian women, what they did to the elderly, what they did to the children here. I don't think that will change the Russian society, but they need to face the reality of what they brought on here. Again, that has nothing to do with the legislation, but that is this very strong feeling that I have, that people have to face it. They have to understand that this is what has been happening, no matter how hard that is. It's, again, very hard to watch. I went there the other day with the European MPs who came here to Ukraine. And I could see them being shocked with actually seeing the bodies being digged up and, for investigation and all. It's extremely difficult for all of us, but we have to focus on bringing those responsible to justice. That is what I'm trying to focus on as much as I can, no matter how hard it is.
Ina Sovson, thank you so much for sharing that with us. It's hard to listen to, but not as hard as it is for you to see it, and not as hard as it is for your countrymen, countrywomen to have lived through it, gone through it, and died with it. That's the situation in Ukraine. Ina, stay with us, please. Let's bring in Melinda Herring from the Atlantic Council. I suppose, Ina calling for Russians to actually be made to sit down and watch what happened. I suppose a start would be as if they had sort of proper reporting and weren't just fed propaganda, because that appears to be the situation, doesn't it?
Yeah, Mark, I think Ina's right that that's exactly what needs to happen. These videos and these images are unspeakable. I can't sleep at night after watching them, frankly. But the problem is that Russians are never going to see these images and see these videos because independent media in Russia doesn't exist anymore. Yes, you can kind of get around it by using a VPN, but very few people are doing that. There's a big problem. So Vladimir Putin has gotten rid of all independent media, and people are being fed a whole diet of lies. So I think it's time for the Western governments, for my government in Washington and for other Western capitals, to put real money behind a Russian language television station, put it in Berlin where there's great real estate, where there's great creative talent, and start spreading the truth about what's happening in Ukraine. There's huge demand for it. I know in the second week after Putin went into Ukraine again, the numbers at the BBC Russian language service had tripled. So it's time to put real money into a Russian language television station so that people can see what's really going on in Ukraine.
Melinda, you talk about the things that you've seen. Clearly we're kind of focusing on Mariupol in the latter part now of our debate. How do you begin to sort of process what might be happening there, what we might be seeing next? We're talking from the mayor of the city, some 20,000 plus might be dead, might be more. It's hard to really get your head around the whole aspect of what is happening, isn't it?
Yeah, Mark, he said they think there's 22,000 dead in Mariupol. That's probably a huge underassessment. We don't know. No one has been able to get in there for more than 40 days. I think the point, though, and I hate to say this, I don't want to say this, but it's going to get worse. If the West does not stop Vladimir Putin, Ukraine cannot do it on its own. If the West does not stop Vladimir Putin, he's going to do what he did to Mariupol to every big city. Yesterday, one of Putin's closest advisors gave an interview, and he said, "We aren't scared of NATO. We aren't scared of the Article 5 guarantees. Once we finish finish off in Ukraine, we're going after Europe. That's frightening. That's incredibly frightening. And I think we need to take these guys at their word and stop Vladimir Putin. And we especially need to get the Ukrainians planes, in addition to the list of gear that we put out, especially the S-300s and the BTRs. They really, really need planes right now.
Melinda, thank you very much indeed. Stay with us. William Alberg in Berlin, coming back in from the International Institute for Strategic Studies. Mariupol, over the next few days, it is likely to be a scene of even more destruction. That's if there's anything left to actually destroy. The images we're seeing show a place that is completely obliterated, almost it seems. But there are people in there, and this is the disturbing matter, isn't it?
Oh, it is. And I mean, honestly, I think we're going to look at Mariupol and it's going to end up looking like Grozny. It's just going to be completely flattened by indiscriminate attacks, block by block, to destroy everything until all the Ukrainian defenders are killed, and they'll fight to the last man. And the result's going to be just horrific. I mean, this is a beautiful city, and you see footage of it online at its height, even as recently as a year ago, such a beautiful place. And the Russians' legacy of this war is going to be flattened cities like this.
William, thank you. Bear with us for the moment. The US has donated some $250,000 to the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, the OPCW, as part of an effort to provide Ukraine with supplies and equipment in case Russia were to deploy chemical weapons, as it's now feared they have. It was in the Syrian war, of course, the ongoing since 2011, that allegations of the use of chemical weapons were voiced. Russia was propping up the regime of Syria's President Bashar al-Assad, still is. Eyewitness reports said that sarin and chlorine barrel bombs were used systematically in the battlefield during the Syrian conflict, killing or injuring thousands of people, and roughly 150 cases are currently under investigation by the OPCW. 20 uses have been confirmed. Now let's hear an account from one man who lost his family in what was believed to have been a chemical attack.
On the 4th of April 2017, Khan Sheikhun, my town, the neighborhood that I live in, was hit by poison gas, sarin, a chemical gas. My twins, Ahmad and Aya, my wife, were martyred in addition to my siblings, my sister-in-law, her children and my cousins. More than 90 people in my neighborhood died. There were rooms full of martyrs. I didn't know who to say goodbye to. My brother, my nephew, my children, my wife. They were really tough moments. It's impossible for anyone to imagine the catastrophe. It was like doomsday. I felt like there was nothing left in the world. It became totally empty.
Absolutely heartbreaking. Bree Brody, I know you're listening to that with great intent, and I'm not going to ask you to comment on the weapons or the actual use, but it's for me, it's the legal process. How do we get accountability on this? How do we find who's responsible? How do we prosecute them?
Well, first of all, I mean, nobody was prosecuted for that attack.
Yeah, that's
nobody was
it,
prosecuted for what happened in Grozny. Nobody was I mean, unfortunately, who has been prosecuted for chemical weapons? I mean, the U.S. used napalm in Vietnam. I mean, and so, the same day that we learned about the horrors of Bucha, 300 Malians were killed by soldiers and including by Russian mercenaries.
The Wagner mercenaries.
I think our mobilization is more credible when it's not selective. As horrible as these things are, and equally horrible things are happening in Yemen today, in Tigray today. And what I would hope is that the empathy and the solidarity we're feeling with Ukraine and Ukrainian victims would be generalized, and that tomorrow we will feel the same way when we hear about 300 Africans being killed or 300 Arabs being killed. The same way that the solidarity we're showing wonderfully towards Ukrainian refugees in Europe would also be shown to Afghan and to Syrian refugees. But the process is underway for justice here. And people, there are literally thousands of people now working to develop evidence of these war crimes and to begin to show, who may be responsible for them. And there will be a justice process. The time of justice is not the same as the time of politics, and particularly the time of military. But President Zelensky himself has repeatedly talked about the need to develop evidence and as Ina was saying, to bring the people who are committing these crimes to justice. And it's something that those of us who are lawyers and who are human rights activists can help to do as the other things are playing out.
Reid Brody, thank you very much indeed. Reid Brody, member of the International Commission of Jurists, former Assistant Attorney General of New York State and former Human Rights Watch spokesperson. Thank you. Thank you to Melinda Herring, Eurasia expert at the Atlantic Council. Always a pleasure to have you on the programme, Melinda. Thank you to William Alberk from the International Institute for Strategic Studies. And thank you to Ina Sovson, MP in Kyiv. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. I don't know, it was painful stuff to go through, but thank you very much. Really important, I think, to hear your views. And thanks to you for watching wherever you are, of course. Stay with us here on France 24. More to come.